Madam Toastmaster and fellow Toastmasters. Today I would like to take this opportunity to introduce a concept. It's called nested loops. It's a way to stack multiple stories and use that almost as a tool to shift people. When we say, if you are in IT industry or you're familiar with programming language like Shannon, nested loops means you got those brackets around, you have the program inside the program of the program. And each program is doing different things, and eventually the whole packet accomplish something that the programmer are hoping to do. In the context of storytelling, there's a way to tell stories by stacking those stories together. It looks more like this. You start with the story, and then somewhat you divert it to a different story, and then continue it for a while, then you divert to another one. And to a point, at the center of the deepest story, you embedded a suggestion or a message that you want to get across, which I will give you a quick example at the end of the speech. And see if you guys remember what is the message that embedded inside of all the stories. And then on the back end, then you start to close that inside story and then jump one level up, then close the next level, and then jump one level up and close the last level. As a matter of fact, that I remember I was inspired by Barbara's speech because she tends to go like this. She tends to go one story and then just divert it to a different direction, She's a very talented speaker that has a great potential to do this. What she's missing is the other side of the loop. The magic of nested loop is, and Shannon can pick me up that if you have a nested loop without the bracket on the other side, the program will not happen. So the magic is relied on when we start closing the story on the other side. It's somewhat created, our mind will try to close the story somewhat. It created a slight, almost amnesia. You almost forget what was in there. And that's the power of nested loops, that be able to influence people or shift people at the unconscious level. So I'm not as good as Barbara, I'll be able to shift it that naturally, but I did play with this concept and created a nested loop for you. Some people told me that they are not good storytellers. I don't know if I agree with that. But when I was thinking about talking about the concept of these nested loops, it did take me a while to put these things together because I want to be able to use this. I want to be able to craft the perfect nested loops. And of course, whenever you have the idea of perfect, nothing will come because I put so much pressure on myself that nothing come to mind. My mind went blank. And I was sitting at my desk, look at a blank piece of paper and I have no stories to tell. This is horrible because in order to have loops, you need a couple of stories that somewhat you can stack them together. It's like, no, what do I do with this? I went blank. It's just like how when I was in the improv class with Second City, the teacher, whenever he say light, that means it's time to get on stage and perform. Whenever he said light, I just turned into a deer. The one that called by light. When my mind was blank, that I don't know what to, that have nothing come to mind, that I don't know what to do. And of course, the teacher will always say, get out of your head, just do it. Well, it's easy for him to say. I got out of my head and nothing comes. Seriously. I didn't know why. And I was trying to search for the reason. Is that because I don't have the ideas? Because this is just intimidating? Or because I just couldn't get English right? I don't know. I stressed out. And then it's not until The teacher mentioned that one of the biggest challenge for improvisers is fear. Many improvisers, they're so afraid they're not being funny enough, they're not saying something smart, they're not doing it right, or whatever thing they're afraid of. And if you take a step back, pretend you're an observer looking at the Julia suffering in improv class, it's kind of stupid. Because, hey, I'm in the classroom. If I knew how to do this, I wouldn't be in there. So the classroom is safe, but I didn't feel that. I was still so afraid. 15 years ago, I remember this little guy, little Chihuahua my neighbor had, and her name is Wawa, and she had the two black eyes, so cute, and she fit in your palm. So cute, little fur little creature. But just like most of the toy dogs, she's always been hyper and nervous and yippy and bark at just about anything. She bark at, if there's a car went by, if an airplane flew by, if the garbage man stopped by, and she bark at me every single time. Even I knew her ever since she was with our neighbor. I was like, come on, this is like the third year I've seen you, you still bark at me? But this little creature, she was so, whenever I grabbed her, she was just shaking and then trying to figure out what's going on. She was barking and said, like a little dog that's trying to figure out what's going on. And all I can do was just pat her. All I need to do was just pat her and say, oh, well, it's okay. You're safe here. Nothing to be afraid of. Come on, you're at home. You're with Auntie Julia. Relax. Just relax. Come on. Hey, hello. Are you okay? And then gradually, she would just calm down and relax. And I'm like, yeah, I got it. So now every time when I stressed out in improv class, when I turn into a deer, I start doing this before the teacher called light. Although my classmate might be wondering what Julia was doing, is she getting ready for the character or not? Or every time I do this, that this imaginary dog calm me down, because I will talk to her and say, hey, it's okay, you're safe here, relax. And then I would just let go and let it happen. So people say they are not good storytellers. Some people may say that. I believe we're all naturally good storytellers. We just need to find a way to take the pressure off and unleash our ability to tell stories.
I really always enjoy watching you, because you have a way of captivating me. You express your emotions very nicely, and I can feel that as you project it. So the things that I liked is really liked that you stepped in to explain a complex concept, and being able to explain nested loops takes me back to my programming days. But certainly explaining that to a lay person, it's a little bit complicated until you tell it's a story within a story within a story, but you have to have a beginning and a conclusion. So I think that really came across well, and so I could accept that. I also like the examples of the deer, the light, and then I can just imagine picturing your eyes and frozen as a deer as you had the improv class. So, and the humor was throughout that, so I just found myself smiling and laughing voluntarily. And also with Wawa, I thought, oh, clever, Chihuahua, okay. That's the explanation about that and the fear, and giving us a very good conclusion to go forward. The thing that I would certainly look for you to consider is the example was not clear enough. I couldn't see it. I just knew you had a piece of paper and that's it. I couldn't even see the lines. I could barely see the line. So I would think that perhaps since we have a presentation tool there, that you could easily turn around and go to the whiteboard and even start sketching it out. And even as you sketch it out, even if you have your back to us, I think that gives us a better visual. And or you could have it already sketched out before and just open it up and then we could see that.
Julia, I like that you had a prop. I think Rocky's right, it could be a little more visible, but definitely was a good prop. You had humor all the way through and you had a technique. Thoughts for development. First thing is, I strongly suggest you say, I would like to do. As Craig Valentine says, world champion speaker, no one cares what you would like to do. Just tell us. Here it is. Nested loops are. You need to know this because you will discover, you will find out, you will learn. Step out of the story. Even I know that may be a nested loop itself. Step out of the story. Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever done that? I mean, that would be an example maybe of a nested loop. Little sub-loops inside of things. Story really depends upon conflict. You really want to make sure it's some sort of conflict. Your stories, to me, didn't seem to go anywhere, and therefore they were difficult to really pay attention to. It's like, here's a story, here's a story, here's a story. Why? What do I get out of it? What's the payoff? What am I really about? So you want to have conflict. Tease has got to be important conflict, and then at the end, boom, the conflict is resolved, and the person gets something out of the story. Second, what Rocky said is that I wasn't really quite too sure where it was going. At the end, it just seemed to just stop. And it didn't really have any finale, any conclusion, you wrap up, well, here's where we saw this, do the thing, demonstrate it, but then afterwards do a debrief. And finally, I do want to apologize for the timing. I was running like 3 different things. One thing I didn't do is do the timing. When I saw on the movie thing, it was like about 9 minutes. I figured, okay, let's wrap things up. So you're doing just fine. But I think something like this would demand at least 10 to 15 minutes, I would say, to do justice on it. Because you want to set the thing up, explain what it is. You want to give an example. Then you want to debrief and say, what you've been talking about.
It seemed like it took you a little while to get into it. I would have almost preferred you to just show that diagram right away about what nested loops were, because it took a while for me to understand the concept of the shifting story. But I think if you would have brought that paper out at the very beginning, it would have got you right into things. It's just my honest.
What I remember especially is your gestures and your vocal variety and your facial expressions. That really appealed to me very much. And your humor. We're not supposed to repeat what others said, but that is definitely, that's you. You shine through in your speeches or in this speech that I really liked. In terms of improving, I felt like, oh good, I'm following this story, how it's a nested loop, it's improv, and then I went to the dog, and then I went to and coming back, I definitely could see how you're closing those. I liked that. I don't know if every listener outside of this room would catch it. So again, the conclusion where you say, this is how we did, I did a story about nested loops, or obviously you would make that more articulate. But
I would suggest for you right off the bat, you talked about computer programming nested loops. I think maybe you could have had a little example of that because that looks slightly different than the diagram you set up. And even as you said that, I understood, of course, what it was, but I was thinking, I don't understand what this has to do with storytelling. And then you produced a graphic, which I could see, and I thought you explained it very well. But one thing, a couple of other suggestions that I have for you is one of the things I really liked was you showing us the Chihuahua, although it seemed like it must have been the world's smallest Chihuahua because you really could hold it in your hands. And one of the things that we learned in improv is if you've got some kind of prop, you have to put the prop down, and at one point you just kind of gestured and
Drop the Chihuahua!
and kill the dog. So I would suggest that you make it more what the size we expect, and please take good care of it. Also, I would suggest that perhaps you might want to call this nested stories instead of nested loops, because I think that that's kind of more of what we had. And it is based, of course, on nested loops, but nested stories is more. And I also think that you can do more with the idea that in this nest of stories, you get more than just one, which I think is an advantage.